Hi there, this is Josh from Literary Gladiators, and today I'm here with a very special guest. You may remember him from our interview 6 years ago. That was when we did the interview in my library on my phone. But with the miracles that we call Zoom, we are now able to do it in this much better format. You may recognize him from Goodreads. He is one of the prominent Goodreads reviewers, and after all of this time, he still makes frequent appearances within the top 100 when it comes to reviewers from the United States. Glenn Russell, it is an honor to have you back on board.
Well, it's a pleasure being here, Josh. Really do appreciate you having me.
Alrighty, let's get right into the questions. As far as one of the things that you're known for most, in contrast to other reviewers, is that you, when we first spoke, all of your reviews were 5-star, and but since you have restructured your reviews and removed the star rating system completely. What inspired you to do that?
What happened was when I first started reviewing 9 years ago, Josh, I wanted to write reviews in a way that would create as much positive energy as possible. I knew that there was some residue, there were some ideas about Goodreads being a negative site. And matter of fact, some authors refer to Goodreads as the hate reads, and there's a lot of negativity. So I wanted to inject a large measure of positivity. I wanted to be positive. And also, in 50 years of voracious reading, I have read maybe 4,000 books. And what I wanted to do when I first joined Goodreads is I wanted to fuse the cream of the crop and really focus in on what was positive about these books and how people would be well to read these books, to expand their horizons, to deepen their perspective about books. So in that sense, I wanted to really focus on what I would judge the 5-star reviews. And I don't think, because I was reviewing mostly classics by Plato and Aristotle and the authors like Tolstoy, I don't think there would be any doubt that these books were excellent. But for the first 5 years on Goodreads, I confined myself to writing reviews about really the great books, and I wanted to write it in a way to motivate people to read these books and to deepen their experience of life and of reading by exposing themselves to these books.
And what was it that inspired you to just drop the star rating altogether?
What happened was, after about 5 or 6 years, I wanted to do a few things differently. First, I wanted to maybe focus on some books that were not really the cream of the crop, and maybe even inject some humor into some books that were written by authors like Marilyn Quayle or Pat Robinson, things like that. Books that I think people are well to know that they're really not classics. They're not books that should be read in a completely serious way. And also, equally important, I wanted to have my books reviews speak for themselves. When you read a New York Times book review or a Guardian book review or a book review by Los Angeles Review of Books, they're not using the star system at all. And I wanted to, in effect, again, to have my book reviews speak for themselves. And as it turns out, one of the reasons why I went to the star system is because readers would be more attracted, as I understand, readers on Goodreads would be more attracted to reading 5-star reviews. Well, in 6 years, I have had, in effect, I must have over 11,000 Goodreads members that are following my reviews. And another 5,000 people asked to be my friend on Goodreads. So once I had readers drawn to my reviews because I was writing 5-star reviews, that once I had that fund of readership, I thought that I could convert to a non-star system and retain those readers, and again, let the review speak for itself. And again, broaden my reading purview where it would be reviews of books that are not necessarily 5-star books.
And you've certainly done that. You've certainly been able to retain a great and committed audience, and I could say so myself. But as far as I think you are absolutely right as far as people using these platforms. I think where you're looking to ignite positivity, a lot of people are looking to these sites. You see it all the time on Yelp and other, where people, they're impassioned to write about something. They're impassioned to write about a bad experience as opposed to a good one. So I think that you're doing a great job incorporating reason for why people should look into something as opposed to why people should turn away.
Yeah, exactly. And especially since it's in our brave new 21st century world, there's so much competition for reading books. People can watch television, they can play computer games, they can do all types of things that are not necessarily reading. So if a reviewer is committed to writing reviews in a way that energizes people, that motivates people, that will inflame people to read a book and to consider a book and to think about a book, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that, and I think I'm being the optimist that I'm seeing more. I'm seeing an increase in readership as well. Especially, I thought that poetry was going by the wayside, but with a lot of things going on, you're beginning to see more recognition for poetry. At Barnes and Noble, at first it was relegated to a little section in the back of the store. Now I see some on display.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, and the Goodreads members is over 120 million worldwide currently. That's a lot of people.
Yeah, that is quite, and it's just amazing the fact that people are joining in that matter. Maybe not using their Goodreads as often as you would want them to, but it's still nice to have that, because 120 million people is, I would say, about a third of the United States, but this is a global entity.
The beauty of Goodreads is that it's a worldwide community. When I write a review and I post a review at 10 o'clock on Saturday morning, it goes out to worldwide readership, and by 11:30, in an hour and a half, I will have comments in my review from people from India, from Argentina, from Amsterdam, from Russia, from California, even New Jersey.
That's the amazing thing about the online, the blogosphere, the Goodreads and BookTube and everything in between. I wanted to follow up on the first question about what your thoughts are about the Goodreads review format and their current rating system, because I know with someone like you, probably if you weren't able to build that foundation that you did within the first 5 or 6 years, removing your star rating system probably would have had an impact on your viewership when it came to your reviews. But Goodreads just has a simple 1 to 5 star rating system. You can withhold rating it with stars, but it doesn't necessarily bring attention to your review.
Right. I respect people that put a lot of time and energy into providing a rating system of a review being 3 stars or 4 stars or 2 stars or 5 stars. I myself didn't do that. Once again, in the first 6 years, when I would choose books that I felt would be worthy of people's reading, that would broaden a reader's horizon, and I simply had 5 stars. And then when I convert it to no stars, then I review a book like somebody does at the New York Times. You simply write a review and you will highlight the positivity of the books, and if there's any drawbacks, if there's any negativity, you include that as well. So the idea of a reviewer, I would recommend, if people were starting out on Goodreads, to use the star system initially to build up a foundation of readership. Then if you prefer to eliminate the star system, you can do it at that point. But again, you'll have a good fund of readers reading your reviews.
And by no star, you mean not using a star rating, because
Exactly.
is also the 0-star rating, which
right.
They don't have one. I mean, when I write a 0-star review, I use 1 star, but I signify at the beginning of the review what my actual rating is.
Right. That, but no, to clarify, the idea of not using the star rating means that you're writing a review where you're simply letting the review speak for itself.
That does that is a good method for somebody that you just want them to. You give them the details, and then they make their own judgment as to whether or not they want to pick up the book and read it.
Exactly. Well, I know a lot of people say that they will read a book and they'll put it on their to be read list on the strength of my review. I have hundreds of people that tell me that, and I take good heart in that. And also, it underscores for me the seriousness of, I don't take myself seriously, but I take my reviewing seriously. It's an art. And the idea is that when you're engaged in an art form, to give it your best shot, to really bring all of your energies, because people will take what you're saying seriously. And put a book on their list predicated on your judgment, and I take that whole dynamic seriously, and I write a complete review with that in mind.
I think that's just so mean. It probably means so much to have an impact on somebody's reading practices. Which I think I can feel the same as well. I think it does mean something to make a difference with somebody's reading, be it
it warms my heart that I have a number of younger reviewers that have written me personal messages, and they're asking for guidance on how to develop their own reviewing, which I've taken the time to give them a little bit of guidance in terms of what books they can read to improve their writing, my methodology of going about improving my reviewing. One method I used was back in the days when I first started reviewing, was I would take excellent reviews written by James Wood or Makiko Kakutani of the New York Times, or Anthony Burgess, writers like this, John Updike, and I would write out their reviews word for word, 1,000-word review. I would write out their reviews word for word to get the rhythm of what it was to write a superb review. And also what I did was, which was very helpful, is that I would take their reviews and I would use a digital recorder, and I would record their reviews and listen to their reviews while I was taking my walk. While I was taking my walks during the day. And then after maybe 2 or 3 months, what I would do is I would record one of their reviews, and then I would record one of my reviews and listen to them concurrently. I'd listen to John Updike, then I'd listen to my review, then I'd listen to James Wood, and I listened to my review to, as best as I could, make sure that the vocabulary, that the syntax, that the observations were at the best level that I could create.
That is quite an intriguing strategy, to write other people's reviews word for word in order to create, for the sake of creating a rhythm, so that you have that ability to develop your own taste and see what you like from that, and incorporate it into what you would want to be. It's pretty much writing the review that you want to read.
Exactly. And what happened was I have a friend a number of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, where he was a professor and he was also a theater critic. And what I did was, because he was asking me about my reviews and I mentioned this whole format, he said, "That's really intriguing." I said, "I'll tell you what, I will send you a copy of my review of a particular book." It was Galactica 2.2 by Richard Powers. "And I will send you a review by Carlin Romano of this book. That's a comprehensive review, 1,000 words. And also Makiko Kakutani. I'll send you 3 reviews of this Powers novel, Galactica 2.2, without letting you know who did the reviewing. In other words, blind." And I said, "You let me know which one you thought was mine, and what you think of the 3 reviews." Again, I'm using 2 superb reviewers and I'm using myself. And he said, "I read all 3 reviews and I have to tell you, I can't tell you which one was yours." He said all 3 were good. He said, "I particularly liked because it was getting into the specifics." And he mentioned this one review, which turned out to be mine. And at that point, I almost broke into tears. I thought, I accomplished in my life as a writer, as a reviewer, what I wanted to accomplish. I wanted to write first-rate reviews. And what happened was, and it's a dream come true, Josh. It's an absolute dream come true. I'm 72 years old and I've been doing this for 9 years. And every day I am so thankful. I am so inspired to sit down and write about books, to formulate my ideas in writing. Because when I was in my 30s, I would read New York Times reviews and I would read reviews in the Philadelphia Inquirer. Carlin Romano was the top reviewer at that time, in those days. And I thought to myself, if I only had the chance to write a review like that where people could read my review, and if I only had the talent. And again, with Goodreads and the internet and with a lot of my dedication to writing, I've brought to myself to that position. So I feel very fortunate indeed.
And that's it's just incredible being able to make it to that point. It's someplace. It's something that many of us, be it through Goodreads, through BookTube, or any of those outlets, strive to accomplish. But the second question kind of follows up on the first question about what has fueled your fire to continue reviewing, and what do you feel it takes to fuel your fire in order to continue?
Well, I think the idea of reading a novel, if we just focus on literature for a moment, that when you are choosing a book to read, that you're following your bliss, a phrase Joseph Campbell would use, that you're not reading as a matter of obligation. You're not reading because you are assigned the book. You're not reading to make somebody else happy. You're reading for your own enlightenment, your own expansion. And when you follow your bliss, when you follow your own inner light in choosing a book where you feel in your heart, you'll expand your world. That means that will mean a lot. And with that perspective, when you open yourself completely to the author's vision, if you read a novel, if you're opening up the book, you're opening yourself to the author's vision, and through the magic of fiction, you can enter into the world created by the novelist and see the world as the narrator is seeing the world. And what that does is, as I say, if you're a reader, you're not living one life, you're living 1,000 lives.
That's the part that's I think it was George R.R. Martin that said or he was probably one of many that said that a person that reads lives 1,000 lives and a non-reader only lives one.
In that spirit, opening yourself up to a vision completely and immersing yourself in the world of the novel. And not only that, what really has fired my expansion and my ability to review again and again and again in my commitment to reviewing. And I'm now, I just checked it this morning, and I have reviewed on Goodreads 1,200 55 books.
Ooh, that is impressive.
And the idea is that I shift my focus from literary fiction, fiction that is considered great literature, to science fiction. And a lot of times in science fiction, I use the new wave authors, people like Philip K. Dick and Michael Moorcock and Brian Aldiss. And for me, that fires my imagination, because the new wave science fiction, more than investigating outer space, it's investigating inner space, inner psychological space. And to get into the androids, and to get into the power of drugs, things like this, to use the facility of the mind to go into different dimensions. That, for me, is fascinating.
Science fiction, especially because it does explore the fantastical and the speculative, but at the same time, it explores the realities of our own world.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
That makes it even, because that's the major difference between that and the ever popular fantasy, where it can explore the realities of our own world, but it's often driven by imagination. With science fiction, there's could be a possibility that it could take place.
Right. And on that, also, what is referred to as the fantastic literature that is, and I'm not talking about fantasy in the sense that Tolkien writes fantasy, although that's wonderful. I'm not a big fan of Tolkien-esque fantasy, but what I'm a fan of is the fabulous, and the fabulous in the sense of Kafka's Metamorphosis. No one really wakes up as a 6-foot bug,
no.
But he's using that to investigate the interrelationship of a family and a society. It's a marvelous technique, marvelous imagination. Or the fanciful little story, Nikolai Gogol's The Nose. Fellow wakes up and he doesn't have a nose. The nose takes on a life of its own. That type of fabulism. And there's one author from Serbia, his name's Zoran Zivkovic, that has written 23 novels in the spirit of Middle Eastern fabulism, or the fantastic. And I have written reviews of all 23 Zoran Zivkovic novels. He's a magnificent writer, and he writes in the spirit of Nikolai Gogol writing The Nose, or Kafka writing The Metamorphosis. And he uses the fabulous as a superb mechanism to deepen a reader's appreciation through the story, a reader's appreciation of the main themes of fiction, which are love and death.
Those are things I'll have to check out. Gogol's The Nose, and the Serbian author that you made mention to. I've read The Metamorphosis by Kafka, along with his other short stories, and I think that just his approach is just spectacular. But you can pretty much, you could pretty much limit his themes to 3 topics: his father-fearing stage, his quest for salvation as a Jewish man, and his TB stage when he was dying from tuberculosis. But the way that the fantastical ways that he imagined it was just, it created a life unto its own. In some ways, even a monstrosity of a creature.
Right. And when people explore that, the more they get into it, it's like eating cookies. The more you eat, the more you want to eat. And eating peanuts, it's a wonderful experience. The more people can get into that, I think, again, their life will expand. And the other areas of fiction, again, you were asking about what really sets the fire. Well, I'll read those types of fiction, but I also like some crime noir fiction. And especially, I was into an author by the name of Donald E. Westlake, and he wrote as Richard Stark, and he wrote 23 Parker novels. And Parker was the ultimate American anti-hero. And in all 23 novels, he has Parker speaking, and he never has Parker speak a word that he doesn't have to speak. The ultimate taciturn protagonist.
Isn't that how we all wish? We don't have to speak a word that we don't have to, that we, every
That's
word
right.
that we speak matters.
And the starkness, that's why he chose the name Richard Stark. He said, so I can make sure that I adhere to the vision that I intended to. Everything has to be stark. But he wrote those novels, all 23, and I would say that there isn't a paragraph that's superfluous. Every single paragraph of the Donald Westlake writing as Richard Stark contribute to the story. Essential to the story. Through 23 novels, quite an achievement.
Yeah, it certainly is. And I know next month, one of our contributors is going to be talking about one or more of the Parker novels in a video, an individual video, which I'm looking forward to. And have you heard of the I think it's Staic noir series, which are the crime noir? They're collections of short stories set in different, they're anthologies from different areas. Like,
oh yes. There's one for Cuba, and there's one for even cities. There's one in Philadelphia. Yes, Philadelphia noir and Cuban noir and Puerto Rican noir. Yes, I'm familiar with those authors and familiar with those stories. Yes, wonderful.
Yeah, it started with Brooklyn Noir, and there's 3 that make up the Brooklyn series. New Jersey has 1. The only thing I'm a little bit disappointed with is that they just incorporate the Jersey Shore and South Jersey as one. I think that even though the northern cities are more familiar, or Camden or Atlantic City, I think that there are areas that could get recognition as their own. And
right. Well, let me put a plug in for Beechwood, New Jersey. That's where I'm from. I'm from the shore of New Jersey. Beechwood, New Jersey.
That's only a few towns away from me.
Yeah, right. And incidentally, I was born in Newark, New Jersey, and that was the birthplace of Paul Auster. Paul Auster, the New York trilogy. He's up in Brooklyn now. Paul Auster was born in Newark, New Jersey, as was Philip Roth.
Wasn't Allen Ginsberg is from?
Allen Ginsberg is a Jersey boy too. That's right.
Yeah, I know. I thought he was from Newark, but
I'm not quite sure if he was from Newark, but he was from New Jersey.
Yes. Okay.
And incidentally, well, before we move on to the next question, I wanted to let you know another aspect of my going in the span of literature is that in this past year, particularly past year and a half, I have discovered a couple new authors that are language oriented, meaning that they really focus on the language. And I'm thinking of Gary Lutz and Ben Marcus particularly.
Yeah, it's just quite something when the various aspects that make up a great piece of literature, it's not just the same exact every time.
And precisely, and the beauty is that literature is opening itself and is in such that you can take different angles on it. You can write crime noir, you can write science fiction, you can write fantastic fiction, you can write realistic fiction in the tradition of, say, Charles Dickens's David Copperfield, or Richard Yates's Revolutionary Road, very realistic. Or you could write a story, you could write a novel like Ben Marcus did with The Flame Alphabet, that is emphasizing the language. The actual words and the language, and how the alliteration and how the sound of the language and the sound of the sentences fit together. I think that the idea of approaching literature from all these angles is one that will help a reader keep their fires going.
That and the stream of consciousness is becoming a big thing too, where it's written as it's being recalled.
Right.
As like On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong, which I read that in 2020, and it was quite spectacular. It wasn't written in sequence, but it was written in how it was being recalled. And then he went he devoted a segment to Tiger Woods. Really didn't have much to do with his story, but it did have something to do with him and his background. But let's move on to the next question. We were talking about various formats. What kind of various? But this is more so on the topic of reviewing. What kind of various formats have you explored and exercised when it came to your reviewing?
There's one in particular that I've developed in the past few years, Josh, and that is what I refer to as the hook, frame, and reel. Let me explain. The hook is to say a few things about, let's just take a novel, say a few things about the novel that will really engage the reader. I remember the great editor, Gordon Lish, said that when somebody's writing either a story or a novel or an essay, that the first line or two he referred to as the attack. Something to really grab the reader. So that's what I would refer to as the hook. Where, for example, I wrote a review of Berlin Audiobooks by Dublin, and I said that this is an astonishing novel, fantastic novel. And then I would go into the frame. In other words, that would be the second aspect. First the hook, then the frame, where I give the framework of how the story is set up. If it's taking place in Brooklyn, if the narrator is a first-person narrator, or if the narrator is third person, and there are two or three protagonists, and the dilemma is that somebody's looking for their brother, something like that, how the story is framed. Then another thing that I've developed, where I haven't seen it so much in other reviews, even the New York Times reviews, is that what I would call the highlight reel, is that to section off different segments of the novel, either in terms of 4 or 5 different characters or 4 or 5 different themes. And curiously enough, I think that picks up on how people will view and assess and determine whether they read a book or not. It's similar to a movie trailer, is that if you're going to make a judgment whether you see a movie or not, a lot of times when people will make the judgment based on the trailer. And not necessarily what the theater critic has said in the general write-up, it's the trailer. And what I have attempted to do is, in effect, create a trailer for the novel.
People do that all the time, judge based, and there are like critics, they don't even like to watch the trailer. I remember I read something from Roger Ebert about Gene Siskel, who would he would walk out of the theater while the trailers were. He'd walk out while the trailers were running. But if he was not able to, he would plug his ears and duck down so that he couldn't see or hear it. He had something stand up and scream fire, but he intentionally crossed that out. But that's what I recall, because people are so influenced and impacted by just a trailer for, and the only book, I mean, as far as television trailers for books, the only ones I've ever seen were from James Patterson, but he's as much of a mass market advertising bookseller / author that you can find.
Right. Well, that's a lot of the approach now I use. I either will use a conventional New York Times review format where simply 1,000 words and maybe 7 or 8 paragraphs. And then the other format will be where I especially want the hook, few exciting words about the novel, then give the framework of the novel, then go into the trailer or the highlight reel. And that's what I've really come up with.
It all I mean, the sale of the quality of the trailer has to mean something too. And I'm sure the works that you read, those trailers have quality to them. I think that you're looking for genuine interest as opposed to sales.
Oh, yeah, right. With a trailer for a novel, for example, if I was to write a review of, say, The Goldfinch, I didn't write a review of The Goldfinch, but if I was, I would say you could have as the highlights, you could highlight maybe 4 or 5 main characters in Goldfinch and have a separate little write-up for each character. Or switching, if you had the themes, you could have one theme being the main character's relationship to his friend on the Upper West Side. Then you could have another as a highlight, his relationship with the gentleman who is running the furniture store down in Greenwich Village. And thirdly, maybe his relationship with somebody who was involved in the art world, and things like that. That's the idea. But when it comes to a novel, to really understand, of course, having the experience of having written hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of reviews, you get a feel for what really is important in a novel and what you can bring to the reader's attention. And that's what I focus on when I write a highlight reel.
On the topic of good quality writing and writing that's caught your attention, what new authors have you discovered since we last spoke in 2016?
Oh goodness! In 6 years, I have discovered a number of younger authors. Let me throw out a few names. Kea Wilson, who is an American author. She wrote a book called We Eat Our Own, and it's about somebody an Italian filmmaker making a violent film along the Amazon River. And the way Kea Wilson constructs this novel, varying from first-person account to third-person account, toggling back and forth, and the way she highlights the different challenges that the filmmaker had in the Amazon and what the actors encountered along the Amazon, it's spectacular. You wouldn't think that somebody in their early 30s could write a novel like this, but I wrote a review of We Eat Our Own by Kea Wilson that I would encourage anybody listening to this to go take a look at, because I think that in all modesty, I really brought out what was important about this novel and how the young author was able to do such a magnificent job. And I've also encountered writers like Christopher Priest. I've read and I reviewed, I think, a dozen of Christopher Priest's novels. And what he does is he doesn't like the idea of new wave science fiction, but he writes the type of fabulous fiction that we were talking about before. For example, he has one novel entitled The Glamour, where a number of the characters in the novel can have the ability to turn themselves invisible. And it adds so much in the exploration of what it means to be human, and to have one aspect that is highly unusual. That type of writing I find intriguing. And also he wrote an entire series of the Dream Archipelago, where he creates this entire world where it's very Earth-like, but instead of 7 continents, he has thousands and thousands of islands. And one of the islands has a procedure where they can work chemically with a person to eliminate any mortality. In other words, so the person can live forever.
Well,
and Christopher Priest is one author, and I've in the world of new age science fiction, the British writers Michael Moorcock, M. John Harrison, and Brian Aldiss, those 3, really so imaginative, wonderful writing. And let me just note some others. Pascal Gagne, what I like is existential fiction. In other words, novels like Camus' The Stranger, or Paul Sartre's Nausea, where it gets into the individual facing crises, facing the meaning of life, or the lack of meaning in life. And there's a French author that I discovered, and I read and reviewed all of his novels that were translated into English. His name's Pastel, and he died in about 5 or 6 years ago at the age of 60. But his writing is a combination of existential and also crime noir. And the combination is explosive. Really,
those are going to be writers that I need to look into once everything commences here, and I can. I know that you said that there's going to be a list in the description box of our interview.
Right. I will, at the conclusion of our session here, I'll write you a message, and I'll include all of the authors that I'm mentioning and all the books that I'm mentioning. And while we're on the topic, there's a fiction writer that writes horror fiction, but it's literary horror fiction. Maybe you're familiar with Thomas Ligotti.
Yes, I've heard of Thomas Ligotti.
And I have reviewed probably, and I posted it on Goodreads. The beauty of Goodreads is you're able to post a review not only on novels, but on short stories, individual short stories of well-known authors. And Ligotti's one, and I posted perhaps 25 reviews on 25 different stories. And his ability to probe the human psyche and the dimensions that are usually associated with horror fiction is quite phenomenal. And
oh, you were saying something?
Well, I was just saying that before I forget, there was another author, Lorena Carrington, who was a surrealist who spent her adult life, most of her adult life in her older years in Mexico. And her writing is one of a kind, absolutely one of a kind. And I've reviewed maybe 5 or 6 or 7 of her collections of stories.
Because that's what I've noticed when it came to reviewing collections. I would either review each of, or look at each of the stories and then review it as a whole, or I know some people they'll have a rating for each short story. I mean, with our show, I have, when we decide what we're going to go over, I have it sorted out into different categories, but we don't necessarily rate short stories and poems. We'll discuss them and we'll have opinions about them, but we don't give them a standard rating the way that we would a book or novel or a graphic novel or a play or even a children's book.
Right. Well, curiously enough, my tact, my approach when I am reviewing a collection of short stories is I will make a couple general comments briefly on the collection, but then I'll focus on 1 or 2 of the short stories to give readers, as I say, a closer feel and a more direct tang or taste of what the author's vision is in writing the story. And a lot of times I'll do, and again, it takes practice, do a compressed retelling of 1 or 2 of the stories. And I'll sprinkle in my commentary with that retelling. But I think that for me, that works the best. And I've had a number of people say that they've put collections and searched out authors predicated on my reviews, which I take great pleasure in.
That is a spectacular thing. The next question has to do a little bit, the next question is a little bit similar to the 4th question, only it's more about the works themselves. And what have you been reading as of late? Are there any changes or different areas of interest between now and 6 years ago?
More science fiction, more new wave science fiction, more books that are Latin American fiction, going to areas. I've gotten into Eastern European fiction, and I've gotten into 19th century British fiction. Those areas specifically. Again, I think that the writing that I have been drawn to has been really good, strong writing that cuts across fantasy, the fabulism, the literary fiction, the science fiction, the language-oriented fiction, the crime noir fiction, is that through a greater appreciation and a greater exposure to, maybe 300 or 400 books a year over 6 years. That's a lot of books, a lot of literature. Is that I now have a greater appreciation for what it means to be a good writer.
Okay, yeah.
To be a good novelist, and to also, I have the advantage, because my background is in philosophy, is I've read a good bit of philosophy, and also the philosophy of art, referred to as aesthetics, and I a lot of times can apply the more general philosophical ideas to individual literary works. It's another dimension that I bring to the works of literature, and especially in the last years, I've done that.
You made mention of the fact you were reading more Eastern European fiction. Which publishers, or where have you acquired books of that nature?
A couple publishers I can mention. New York Review Books.
Yes, I have some of their books. I also took part in one of their sales. They do a 50% off.
Oh, good. Well, that's always nice. The New York Review Books has a great selection, and it includes Eastern European fiction and Russian fiction. The Open Door is another publisher that has a lot of Eastern European fiction. Those two. Okay.
Have you explored Dalkey Archive?
Oh yes, Dalkey Archive. I enjoy very much. The authors that come immediately to mind are Jean-Philippe Toussaint, the author of Monsieur, and Television, and Camera. Those three I reviewed of his. The Dalkey Archive, they are really into quality fiction that has a particular flair for language, I should say. A unique way of approaching what it means to write fiction. I'm thinking of a couple other authors that I read. Noël Rivez, who is from Switzerland, a Dalkey Archive author that I enjoyed very much.
She wrote Eating Animals.
Yes, Among the Animals. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I have. I acquired that book because they have them sorted out very, very well organized by country, and then some that they really series that they really take advantage of translating.
Right.
But I do recognize that one. And on the topic of, and also out of curiosity, are you subscribed to any literary magazines or magazines that publish fiction or poetry?
What I do, Josh, is a lot of times when I really enjoy a novel or a work of literature, I will consult the publisher's list. I mentioned Open Door, and the Penguin, of course, is a great source. But a lot of times people ask me, how do you come upon all these authors? And one great source that I have, again, is to explore through the publisher. When I find a new author that I really, really enjoy, I will go to the publisher's site and find other authors that are writing literature within that country. Say, I'll start there.
Yeah, it is quite going by country.
Yeah, I do it a lot by country, and or by region. I know that there are a couple publishers that like to focus on Latin American literature. When I read something that I enjoy, I will go back to their site and see the say the 100 other books by Latin American authors that they've published, and I'll go that way. I don't read the literary magazines so much. I really rely on the online material.
Oh, okay.
Especially from the publisher. That's, I would say, my choices of book is publisher driven.
Okay, that's a good methodology. And to correct myself, I think you are correct with Among the Animals, because I think Eating Animals is Jonathan Safran 4.
Right.
But yeah, I know that I had looked into some literary magazines. I think the one that I've been subscribed to the longest is Poetry magazine.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But I know that you mentioned the New Yorker last night. That's probably the cream of the crop as far as getting your work, a shorter work or a poem published.
Right. My experience in publishing my prose poems, and people are familiar with Russell Edson type of prose poems, that's what poetry I wrote, but that goes back to a prior life. That's when again, I'm in my early 70s. That was when I was in my late 30s, my early 40s. So it's 30 years ago. And I would consult and I'd send my prose poems out to a number of small presses back then that were interested in avant-garde work. And fortunately, I found 4 or 5 small editors, presses that were encouraging me to send more of my work to them. So I had, every time I would write, say, 5 or 6 prose poems, I'd send them out, and nearly all of them would be published. I had that good fortune. Yeah.
Alrighty then. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about, your things that you had been reading as of late? Because our next question is going to be taking a different turn.
I wanted to have a couple words about audiobooks, but let's hold that in abeyance. What's your question?
The next question is about audiobooks.
Oh, okay. Well, then we're on the same ride.
Alrighty then. How have audiobooks played a role in your reading?
Big fan of audiobooks. A lot of times when novels are longer novels, mentioned The Goldfinch, that is a 700-page novel. And if you look at the hours it would take to listen to an audiobook, it would be about 30 hours. That's a big commitment to read a 700-page book or to listen to a 30-hour audiobook. And when it comes to longer novels, I generally tend to listen to audiobooks. I'm a huge fan again. And I think the challenge for a lot of people is to maintain their concentration and listen. Well, I walk. I'm not just sitting there listening to an audiobook. Usually I'm a big walker. During the day, I'll take walks outside, and during the evening, fortunately, I have a huge apartment here, and my wife's in the back, Terry. That's why her name's down in the corner there. It's her Zoom account. But the idea is that I don't bother anybody when I walk inside the house here, and I will walk in the apartment maybe in the evening 2 or 3 hours. It gives me plenty of exercise before I go to sleep, and I'll listen to an audiobook. And once I hook into an audiobook, my concentration is right there. I'm not pulled off. I don't have a stream of consciousness that takes me away from the story and hooks into what was probably the oral tradition, people sitting around a campfire listening to a storyteller in ancient times, is that I will listen to the audiobook 2 or 3 hours at a time in the evening. That's one reason why I can review so many books. Is that not only do I read during the day, my general rhythm is to write in the morning, read in the afternoon, and listen to audiobooks in the evening. And again, I listen to audiobooks a couple hours, 2 or 3 hours a night, and I really get into it. It's as if I'm living the whole story right there. I'm right with the author, living through the whole drama of what's being written about, what transpires.
That's a great routine. Write in the morning, read in the afternoon, and listen to the audiobooks in the evening. And the fact that you incorporate exercise while you're listening to the audiobooks, and not even, it's more so just passive exercising where you're just walking around your apartment, which I think that's a pretty, because most of us were either sitting or laying in bed.
Yeah, no. That's why, if I could put a plug in for exercise and also for reading and writing, is that I've read, as I'm sure people have read also, listening to this, is that when people get older, they have a challenge with losing some of their memory, and their whole mental processes declining, where although I'm 72, with all my reading and all of my writing about books, my mental facilities are sharper now than they ever were. I'm sharper now remembering books and writing than I was even 10 or 20, 30 years ago. And I think, again, a large measure of that has to do with I read so much and I write about books so much.
I think that gives so many people hope.
Yeah, right.
So,
yeah, it's another. I have a gentleman who is he was in the Philadelphia Orchestra. He was the concertmaster, the first violinist, and he's 93 now. And he says that every day he still plays his Bach on his violin to keep his mind sharp. To keep his mind sharp. A lot. They were saying, they did research and they said 2 things will keep your mind sharp: by playing music, and also a good amount of reading.
That is, I don't know. I have yet to get into playing music in a serious matter, but the reading thing, I think I can succeed.
Yeah, you can. Right. Most people can do that. That's right.
Yeah. But as far as audiobooks are concerned, do you generally listen to them at the regular rate, or do you try to speed them up or slow them down?
Usually I'll use the regular speed, 1.0. Sometimes when it's a longer novel and it's a part that is not quite as action-packed as it might be, I'll go up to 1.2. But I don't want to increase the speed to the point where it's I'm trying to simply get to the next scene or to finish it. I want to enjoy the scene as much as I can, and I might increase the speed to 1.20, but not beyond that.
Okay. And as far as the visuals that some books have to offer, I know that there are some books that require, I think, seeing the words or seeing whatever the passage is really makes a difference. Have you noticed any hurdle as far as that is concerned with reading audiobooks?
That's a good question. I don't see any drawback in listening to an audiobook as opposed to reading. I'm thinking of the audiobooks that I've listened to recently. I've listened to Body Electric by Colin Harrison. It's a fun work about the business world, especially the world of New York City. I've listened to the New York Trilogy by Paul Auster on audiobook. I've listened to Connie Willis, the Doomsday Book, and also Passage. And I don't see any drawback in listening to audiobook. I don't think I'm missing anything by listening to audiobook as opposed to reading. I'm getting the story, and I'm appreciating the language as much as I would if I was reading the book.
I mean, it is pretty much the equivalent to having a parent or a guardian or somebody telling you the story at bedtime.
Again, it goes back, I think, to the oral tradition of our ancestors of a storyteller coming into the village and conveying a story over the fireplace, or in the Greek world, the sage going around and repeating Homer's Odyssey and Iliad to the townspeople, people listening to the story as it unfolds. That certainly predates writing. It predates the written language, and I think you're picking up on the energy of that oral tradition by listening to audiobooks.
That's a really intriguing thing to keep in mind, especially because I really don't have much of an interest in ebooks, but as far as audiobooks are concerned, I think there's a bit of a stronger argument and hook as far as alternate ways of reading aside from the physical book.
Right. Well, I'm a big fan of the physical book. Issues with my eyes. I can't read on a screen like that for more than 10 or 15, 20 minutes. I can't sit down and read a novel for an hour on the screen. I like to have not only a book, I like to have a book with a big font, a sizable. It's easy. Yeah.
They have it out there. So, but I know the e-reader, you can adjust the font, but to me, it's just, I look at the computer and I look at screens enough during the day. So
Precisely. I look at screens enough when I'm writing. Of course, I write on the computer. I don't use pen and paper. I think if you're writing a review, a Goodreads review, or actually if you're writing an essay, or if you're writing nowadays, most writers, accomplished writers, will say that it's well to train yourself to write on the computer.
mm-hmm.
Not that that's the final draft. That'll be the first draft, but to do it all on a computer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't use paper and pencil. I will write my first draft of a review on the computer. And in years past, I used to print out the first draft and then do the revisions, by hand, and then go back to the computer. But now through practice, every day, writing for 2 or 3, 4 or 5, and that's the nice thing with practice. I've built up where I have endurance. I can write 4 or 5 hours at a time when I'm writing. So it's not that in itself, it becomes a discipline. It becomes an ability to do that, and I do it all on computer.
Okay, I do my notes with pencil and paper, but aside from, as far as the actual thing is concerned, I'll do it on the computer as far as drafts.
A word about the nice thing about reading a book is that I make notes in the margins, and I'll do underlines and circle paragraphs. In that sense, I write notes. But when it comes to writing the review, I'll take those notes, and it's good when you're reading a book to take notes right on the book, to have notes in the margin, and circle different paragraphs you find are important. That way, when you come to write a review, you have momentum. You're not starting from point zero. You have momentum, and you know what paragraphs, what language, what sections, the characters, of how to really focus when you're writing a review.
Mm-hmm. And you're an annotator, which annotating, I know when I went to college, it's very, I had an instructor that graded annotating.
Oh.
So Dr. Bordelon, who I had for American Literature 1 and 2, we were assigned to annotate as we read along, and during the class he would check out our annotations and keep them in mind.
Good.
But I mean, it's encouraged. I've more so, and people have said that it is you speaking to the text. I personally prefer a notebook. I'm a very meticulous person when it comes to.
Right. Or that's good too. You don't have to write on the page if you have a notebook and a book, and then as you're reading, then you make notes in a notebook. That I've done that as well, especially when it's a library book.
Oh, that you pretty much don't have much of a choice in the sense that
Right.
I mean, you probably could, but people aren't going to be very happy, and they might slap you with a fine. But yeah.
Library book's not my property, so I'm not going to write in a library book. I write in a notebook. And the idea, again, it's worth underscoring, is that I agree with James Wood, is that writing a book review is an art form. It's a legitimate art form, every bit as legitimate as writing a poem, writing an essay, writing a short story, is that you have the techniques and you have the inspiration of sitting down to write. And when somebody reads your review, they can pick up that you have really accomplished what you are setting out to accomplish. You've portrayed the vision of the author. You've brought to light the different strengths, and perhaps you pointed out some of the weaknesses, and you have engaged all the aspects of language and the technicalities of writing in order to create a work that is really worth reading.
Mm-hmm. And we're talking about libraries. You're more of a library user, or do you go to bookstores as well?
Nowadays I order books from Amazon. That's mostly I'll use the library, but again, the drawback is that I have to use a notebook to take notes. I'm not going to write in great book. But when I have my own book, I can mark it up. I can mark it up, and then I keep it on the shelf and go back and read it a second time. And for me, when I go back, I don't have to read the entire novel a second time. I can go to my notes and what's circled, and I can really focus on that, and I have a great sense of what's developing predicated on my notes.
Yeah, I personally, I prefer a bookstore to a library. I've done more online, but I try to avoid Amazon if I can.
Yeah.
But yeah, I get where you're order. I think that there is something special to, or I think that the way that the books that I've ordered, I think it's, if you're looking for something specific, I think ordering it is the way to go. But if you want to look for something new or something, or just support an independent or a brick and mortar, then it's the perfect opportunity. I know one bookstore in Philadelphia that I really enjoyed going to. I only went there once. Was Joseph Fox Bookshop.
Oh yes. He just, that was back in the 80s and 90s. One of the glorious bookstores in Philadelphia. Absolutely.
But they have a whole section for New York Review books.
Right.
And the first, I was looking to incorporate some Heinrich Boole into my book collection, and it was the first thing. It was the first thing that I laid my eyes on, so I got what I was looking for. But the next question has to do with Goodreads. As a platform, do you still see significance to Goodreads compared to other sites that do similar things, such as the StoryGraph, when it comes to reviewing?
Again, Goodreads has 120 million members. I think that outpaces any other book site. And my thrust is to have my reviews read by as many book lovers, as many readers as possible. And Goodreads provides that format. And I am very diligent about responding to comments from my Goodreads friends and from everybody else on Goodreads that will ask questions or post comments on my Goodreads reviews. In other words, if somebody poses a question at 10 o'clock in the morning, usually I'm back to them by 10:30 or 11, because I just feel that that's part of the responsibility. And because I do that, and to enable me to do that, I pretty much have confined my energies to the Goodreads site. I also have my own personal blog where my reviews appear on my blog also, but the activity is virtually nil, of course.
Yeah, I would say it's...
I'm pretty much a Goodreads reviewer, and all the comments that come are from Goodreads. If I did it on 3 or 4 sites, Josh, I think it would be more effort than I'd be willing to put. I don't want to go to 3 or 4 sites. I just want to do it on one site.
And the way I started a StoryGraph account, but I really don't use it. And I mean, one of the aspects is it is very analytical when it comes to your statistics. I think that for the individual keeping track of their own reading, I've seen positives, but when it comes to communicating and being able to express your thoughts with hope that you can start a conversation with other people, or just getting in touch with other people, seeing the book community as a social opportunity, I think Goodreads has proven to be better.
It works for me.
That's what matters. And as long as it doesn't, as long as it's not doing anything to upset you, or I think that, yeah, but Goodreads is a tool, and it's a matter of what you make out of it.
I'll tell you one good thing about Goodreads is that when you write a review, from beginning to end, there's no breakup in the review. In other words, any advertising might be on the right of the review or above the review, but the review itself is one coherent whole. Now, when you read the New York Times online, you read a book review in the New York Times online, they'll break up. They'll have advertisements within every paragraph.
Oh, that's annoying.
Oh, it's annoying. Oh, I'm disinclined to read New York Times reviews, not only because I think the quality has gone down in the last 5 or 10 years, but I don't like to read and being interrupted by advertisements all the time when I'm trying to read a review. That doesn't happen on Goodreads. You read a review, you can read it from beginning to end without any advertisements.
That's the way that's the way that YouTube videos, there's people that'll slap an advertisement in between their video. And that's part of the advertisements are part of the reason why people are more inclined to transition from watching television a bit more faithfully than to going online like YouTube.
Right. Well, I tell you, I grew up in a house. I grew up in the 50s, right? And television was king in the 1950s, really king, black and white TV in every household. And my dad was a factory worker. We had a small house. My bedroom, so-called, was an attic. They created a bedroom. It was really a 2-bedroom house. My sister had 1 bedroom, and my parents had the other bedroom. And what does the son get? I get the attic. That was converted to the bedroom. And my bedroom was where I would do my schoolwork and where I do my reading. It was precisely over where the television was downstairs. So I had to listen to television even when I was reading. And the television was always on. And my only escape, Josh, from television was going off to college. And once I went to college and I fell in love with books, I fell in love with philosophy and literature, I made a decision that I wasn't going to be a television watcher, certainly a television show watcher. I watch occasional sports. I'm going to watch a little bit of the Olympics and such, but I haven't watched a television show in 50 years. That's not my world. It's not my world. I don't watch television. And I read and I expose myself to audiobooks, and I'll do a lot of writing. I always have, but I occasionally watch a movie, but I don't watch television.
That's a pretty good attribute. The only 2 things I'll really want to watch is football and Jeopardy.
There you go.
Or a game show of that nature, an intellectual or a quiz-based game show.
Right. Well, back in the day, the one show I did enjoy watching as a high schooler when I was still at school was William F. Buckley, Firing Line.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but they don't have shows like that anymore.
Yeah, they actually have a version of Firing Line with Margaret Hoover.
Oh, okay. I'll have to check it out.
But I know that William F. Buckley, he was more because you could still see some of his videos on YouTube as well.
You can. I watched them. Yes.
He switched things up a lot where it was
he did.
different. He would approach it differently. The one episode with Margaret Hoover, it was a general interview, just a back and forth.
Right. He would have musicians on. He had Mortimer Adler talking about the great books. Incidentally, I reviewed 2 books by his son, Christopher Buckley. And Christopher Buckley wrote me very nice notes. I wrote a review for his book entitled Wet Work, and he said it was the best review of that book he's ever had. And also, he had a very, his most well-known book was a book he wrote about the tobacco industry. It was called Thank You for Smoking. And I wrote Yeah, I'll mention it when I note the different authors and books to you when we're through with this. Yeah.
Okay, then. The next question is, what kind of other activities have you been engaged in as of late? Anything different from 6 years ago?
I have started a journalist novel. In other words, I wanted to write a journal, but I didn't want to be bound by fact. So even describing it initially as journalist novel, saying in the first few lines, I'm going to write journalist novel because I want to write something simply out of my imagination that gives me the latitude to do so. And I also have segued into using that journal as a dream journal, which I think is good for anybody that's interested in growth, is to remember your dreams, write them down,
Mm-hmm.
revisit them, maybe even look at your dreams in terms of a psychologist you might be inclined toward. I had my dreams scoped out in terms of Jungian psychology for a number of months. And then I got into lucid dreaming, where you actually become lucid. You're aware that you're dreaming. And I've been writing about that. But other than that, I thought that I'd be writing more in the journal. But I have to tell you, I enjoy writing book reviews so much that that's where I want my energies to go. I
Okay.
want my energies to go into book reviewing. I've been listening to music. I have engaged in some other arts. I've visited museums, particularly before the coronavirus. But most of my energy, most of my creative energy has gone into reading books, listening to audiobooks, and writing about books.
Okay.
For me,
Yeah.
it's sheer paradise.
Was there anything you wanted to bring up about your journalist novel that you didn't make mention to?
One thing that I can mention is that I included some of my book reviews in my journal as novel. I thought, well, I really enjoy my own, but no one's a greater fan of Glenn Russell book reviews than Glenn Russell. So I really do enjoy reading my own reviews. And I can say as a corollary, I enjoy reading reviews that are well written, where people have reviewed the same book, and I pick up different things about the book and different considerations, maybe even considerations before I sit down and write the review myself.
Mm-hmm.
In years past, I didn't want to read any other reviews because I didn't want my creative energies being infected by other people's thoughts. But after a while, I just use other people's reviews as, you might say, raw material, just another component of information before I sit down to write a review.
Mm-hmm. Okay, then. As far as your, have you been, as far as music, you're into classical music or the more music that you would find on the radio, or?
When I was a boy, I played jazz trumpet.
Okay.
I like jazz. I listened to Dizzy Gillespie and Al Hurt, Kurt Ballard. And when I went off to college, I discovered classical music, particularly Baroque music. And then when I was in my early 20s, I played medieval and Renaissance music on recorders and other wind instruments in the Philadelphia Early Music Quartet. And I still listen to, throughout the years, I listened to medieval and Renaissance music, Baroque music, classical music. I've gotten into what's referred to as New Age music, where and fusion music, where a lot of musicians like Zakir Hussain plays the tabla. He's an excellent tabla player, and he'll combine his tabla playing from India, the Indian traditional music, with jazz musicians or classical musicians. That, for me, is fabulous. The combination's fabulous.
Mm-hmm. And then you said you're into arts in a general term, and any particular museums you've visited before everything went down?
We went to Amsterdam, and I visited all the Amsterdam museums, particularly the Van Gogh Museum.
Ooh.
What a spectacular experience. My wife and I, because we somehow had memberships to the museums, we went to the Van Gogh Museum first thing in the morning. We were there, I think, at 8 o'clock. We were the first people there. We went right up to the third floor, and we were looking at all those Van Gogh masterpieces that you see reproduced all over the place. And Terry, my wife, and I, we were the only people watching. We were the only people observing the Van Gogh paintings. It was a spectacular experience. We had it all to ourselves for about a half an hour.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
it's quite amazing that someone that only sold a single painting in their life now has a museum and a claim that they should have had during their own lifetime.
Right. Well, yes, that's the fate of a number of wonderful artists, is that they're, in effect, famous and they're recognized and they're appreciated after their death.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Was there anything you wanted to bring up? Anything else that we didn't touch upon that you wanted to bring up?
Josh, I think you did a wonderful job in scoping out the questions. I don't think there's anything else. I think you covered it all, sir.
Oh, excellent.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But if you want to read Glenn's reviews, I'm going to leave a link down below to his Goodreads account in the description box. That's also going to be included with every work and writer that he mentioned in this review, so that you can check it out. I'll also leave a link down below to his journalist novel, where he writes about whole Robin Hood and his adventures. But I want to thank you, Glenn, for taking part, and I highly encourage all of our viewers to check out his Goodreads and follow his reviews. But be sure to join us next time for more videos here on Literary Gladiators. For now, keep reading.
Bye-bye.